SABC News, Channel 404.
Market news now. A Shanghai rally led gains across most Asian markets on Wednesday morning as Chinese investors grew increasingly optimistic over trade talks with the US, with expectations that Washington and Beijing will eventually strike a tariffs deal already baked into equity prices. Analysts say officials will need to provide some clarity on progress to give markets another step up. It's a positive end to the day's trading, with the Tokyo's Nikkei the only one in negative territory, slipping 0.6% to 21,596 points. Hong Kong's Hang Seng managed to move higher just above 29,037 points. The Shanghai Composite was 1.6% to the good at 3,102 points. The S&P 500 dipped on Tuesday as investors digested positive retailer earnings and economic data, but also eyed a key resistance level for the benchmark index after market's strong run. The Dow Jones Industrial was marginally down to 25,806 points. The S&P 500 was 0.1% weaker, edging to 2,789 points, while the Nasdaq Composite was also marginally down 1 point to 7,576 points. For more on the market news, we cross to Arabile Gumede at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Good afternoon, Arabile. Over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. Well, that market picture, as you said there, a little mixed when you take a look at how it has performed in Europe. But locally, we are seeing a whole sprout of green there. So locally, the market is doing a whole lot better. The likes of British American Tobacco faring quite well as well. We'll unpack exactly what's happening there. And even Naspers is performing better than expected as well today. So some sense of positivity returning to the market. But let's unpack those European numbers, and we'll get into the picture here locally in just a bit. Markwe Masilela joining me, of course, as we unpack that market picture as well here this afternoon. Markwe, thank you so much for the time. A slight sense of positivity coming through on the market. One would say that the likes of British American Tobacco and Naspers are probably the headline figures on this one.
By all means, and hence the industrials are doing whatever they're doing. But the likes of British American Tobacco is mainly on the back that this US commissioner who's been against the, the flavored e-cigarettes, the guy will be resigning. So I think hence we see the likes of British American Tobacco celebrating to that effect. But that's the only reason they've been driven up. And as we know with Naspers, the likes of Tencent, if they start doing anything positive, then by all means. But I think for me, the whole story, it's more of, we know currently there is a session that call it the Chinese Parliament. We expect them to come with announcements. We know that they started talking about the possible stimulus in the sense that there might be some tax reductions, and we've seen what does that tax reduction does today. I mean, Donald Trump has done the same thing. We've seen the earnings coming off the U.S. companies, the economy that side. So markets are anticipating that there will be more stimulus coming out of China. And that's after China indicated that, listen, our economic growth target, they've just managed to say the target is going to be less, almost 6 to 6.5. But I think the markets are more driven by the stimulus that is expected of China. But yes, the big headwind is still there because now we need fresh news coming out of the U.S. and China. There are trade issues. And in all fairness, what I've just said is what we've been waiting for. So we need something new, something more detailed that, listen, this is where we're going. So I think that as well is keeping the market in a check. But I think emerging markets are just going up, mainly at the back of the expected stimulus coming out of China. Yeah.
If you head to that US and China trade deal, if there is a resolution in that trade deal, considering just how important the dollar is in the mix of the whole thing and how massive the dollar is in terms of strength, how much more weaker does the South African currency get to if you think about, that process?
Given that we also don't have our own things back home here, because, we've got a potential to do that, then unfortunately, the dollar, instead of it strengthening, it might instead be the other way around, because now people will be back on risk on, meaning they can start buying into emerging markets currencies, because recent people have been moving away. Just take what happened the third quarter of 2018. Money has been getting out of the markets, almost more than 10 trillion, out of emerging markets. But now people are gradually getting back into emerging markets because they're hoping that this whole thing will be sorted out, the trade issues. So it might be the other way around. But yes, we might have our own problems back home here, because we know that we've got the elections coming as well. We've got another important date as well when it comes to the 29th of March. What is the Modi saying, whatever that they need to say. Also, we've got the Brexit that is expected, Also, more importantly, on the 27th, I think people are expecting that China and US might have to announce something by then, after moving the deadline from the 1st of March.
Yeah, we'll see certainly how that goes. Locally, yesterday we got the GDP number come out locally, 0.8% for the year 2018, 1.4% for the fourth quarter. Today, the South African Reserve Bank coming out and saying that they still expect growth to come out at 1.7% for 2019. Is it too optimistic considering the situation we've had thus far in the first quarter, including, of course, that load shedding from Eskom?
It's doable in the sense that we can see that I think people have just started to have a different way of seeing things. People are getting a little bit optimistic, but yes, also as the Reserve Bank, depending what happens to Eskom, because I think that has been the negative thing. But for them to expect 1.7, in my opinion, I think it's kind of reasonable. But we know them, just like Treasury, they've got a tendency of revising all these numbers down.
Yeah, it certainly could hurt if we continue to see those numbers come down. What does it say about the reliability of stats and figures out of not just government, but locally as well? Because for the past 2 years at the very least, we have not met a single target, including our tax targets as well.
By all means. I think our stats are very genuine. You can rely on them. Yeah. The question is our predictions, our forecasting. We tend to miss it more often than not.
Yeah. Okay. Let's turn our attention back to the market picture. And in terms of earnings, we've got the likes of Grindrod having released earnings today as well. What do you make of that company? I mean, it's been very tough, not just in the construction sector, but Grindrod, works across a few sectors as well. Have they been able to manage things across those sectors for them?
So far, so good. For them to turn from a loss to a profit, that's very positive. And I think, like you said, Grindrod, it's more of what's happening with the economy, and not just South African economy. Yeah. For the fact that into shipping, into logistics, if the world economy starts growing, then definitely they start shipping more. And for them to list the shipping thing separately, that was very positive for them, because they managed to realize that the currency translation of almost 2.8, and that was also positive for their earnings. So, and the fact that they also managed to declare dividends as an investor, the only way you make money is buying low and selling high. And also, you need a company to start paying you a dividend. So for them to resume paying dividends, that's also positive. And you don't just do that if you are not sure of your future earnings going forward. So I think one or the other, they've managed to stabilize themselves.
Yeah, that certainly sounds like an awesome picture. Their revenue from continuing operations, they're going up to 3.4 billion rand, while EBITDA, that's earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization, at 645.4 million rand as well. So an interesting picture in there. Just to close things off, I wanted to lead off with some quick news as well out of the platinum market. And the World Platinum Investment Council says that global platinum markets will see their largest surplus since at least 2013 this year. An oversupply seen at 680,000 ounces this year alone. That's some good news for the platinum industry.
It makes sense that there's no demand out of platinum, because platinum is mainly used in diesel cars, and we know what's happening with diesel cars. Most manufacturers are also trying to move away from that, and people are more using palladium. So it makes sense that people will still produce, but surplus will be there. And I think that might hit the prices, because if you've got surplus and there's no demand there, then it's tough.
Yeah, the price of platinum, they're sitting around that $840, $850 fine ounce mark. We'll see how that continues to fare. Makwe Masilela from Makwe Fund Managers joining us, of course, as we unpack that market picture and continuously see just how things have fared. Of course, the likes of Grindrod releasing results, African Oxygen Limited as well, Afrox having also set out their earnings as well. Today, we'll continue to unpack the market picture. Tomorrow, of course, the interesting element will be those MTN set of earnings. We will hopefully speak to the CEO as well tomorrow, just with regards to those earnings live from MTN's head offices as well. So do join us for that. For now, that's where the market stops.